Welcome into the All Things Mizzou podcast. After Mizzou football falls 34-0 in Tuscaloosa, falling to 6-2 on the year, and their college football playoff hopes being pretty much eliminated down there on that loss. On the bright side for Mizzou fans, though, basketball season is just days away. So here on the All Things Mizzou podcast, presented by Missouri Tigers on RSI, first we're going to talk about the rest of this football season, and then we'll be talking with our lead basketball reporter, Chase James, to preview that team. But first off, for football, I'm Joey Van Zummeren, one of your reporters here, along with Michael Stamps, who made the trip down to Alabama for this past week's game. Michael, outside of that really bad football game to watch, how was your weekend down there?
Excuse me, from the experience wise, Tuscaloosa, the campus is pretty remarkable. You could tell it's a SEC school. I think you set yourself pretty well. It was not a pleasant football game to watch. Even when it felt like there might have been hope in that first half, there really wasn't. And then I think Brady Cook getting knocked out pretty much solidified that. It was a heck of an experience. It's going down to Bryant-Denny and Tuscaloosa is, if you're a football fan, that's something that you should go experience for sure, because it's great down there. So a lot of fun. Obviously, just from a general standpoint, you hope for a more entertaining game if I'm gonna make the 9-hour drive down there, but it is what it is. It's part of the job, I guess. So it was a pleasant experience nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at this game, I don't think it's too worth it to spend too much time reeling on it. I do think, though, it would have been a much more frustrating game if two things happened. If Mizzou fans didn't know this is what the team is going into it, I don't think a lot of people were really surprised with it. I don't think a lot of people expected a 34-point loss, but with how they were playing with Brady with him, when the offense even then was not making the most of their opportunities, I think people knew that about this team. I think people knew going into this one that Mizzou's playoff hopes were going to be pretty diminished after this one. I think people learned that about this team in week 5, possibly even earlier, or week 6 when they played Texas A&M. And then I also think it would have been a much more frustrating loss for fans if Brady Cook had played this whole game, because even for what I just said about the offense struggling early on, look, man, it was 6-0 when Drew Pine came in for that last drive of the half. And Mizzou offensively, they weren't able, third downs were just killing them. And part of that was Alabama was just able to send the house on those third downs, because they knew Brady Cook, who last year made a living off of just running for those third downs on his own when things weren't there for him. They were just able to send the pressure on him because he had a bum ankle. He had to roll out to one side of the field each time, so he wouldn't put weight on his ankle, and that became pretty predictable for them. And then obviously wasn't able to deliver many accurate throws on the run on third down. But other than that, on first and second down, I thought Mizzou did exactly what they needed to, and I was, I commended them for being able to get those easy gains on first and second down, because that's what Eli Drinkwitz had talked about, of staying ahead of the sticks. And they were doing a solid job of that. And he talked about having to stick to the dirty running game, keep on churning out those 3, even 2-yard runs and just staying ahead of the sticks, like I said. And they were doing a good job of that. They were in manageable third downs for the most part, and then just could not convert on third down. And then the last series Brady was in, I believe it was the last series, was just a really frustrating thing to watch. And with series like these, it's never really easy to tell if it's play calling, decision making, whatever. But on 3rd and 7, Brady Cook throws a deep pass that's nowhere near his receiver. 4th and 7, same exact thing. Brady throws a deep pass, just for what I had just said about staying disciplined and getting those quick, easy gains. If you're in 4-down territory in that situation, because Blake Craig has not been reliable in that range where they were 40 to 50 yards. And so they know, I would expect they knew they were going for it on 4th down in that situation. You've given Alabama far too many opportunities. Eventually they're going to crack the seal. And they ultimately did. So to take a deep shot on 3rd down doesn't make that much sense to me. But anyways, like I said, if Brady Cook stayed in this game and they still lost, for how good the defense played in this game. That was a defense that you can win playoff games with, and the offense did nothing with it. And obviously, then in the second half with Pine and defense just gets gassed. So, Michael, I mean, your thoughts? Anything I didn't mention from not great performance again?
I mean, I don't know how much we really want to dwell on the past here, but it's kind of hard to watch this game against Alabama and not look back a couple weeks ago when they played Texas A&M, both on the road, hostile environments, very, very, very good defenses. And Missouri's defense didn't get the job done against A&M. That's one thing, but at least you have that to hold your head on to an extent against Alabama. But offensively, there are just too many parallels. It didn't seem like there was any flow or rhythm. Even when Jamal Roberts and Marcus Carroll both go over 70 rushing yards. I think, Carroll had 80, Jamal Roberts 71. That's both on 17 carries, about 4 yards per carry, which to an extent, that's going to get the job done, but no, really any big plays at all. And obviously you're missing your lead back and you're missing your quarterback, so you're limited. But it's kind of hard to, not draw some of those parallels. I mean, struggle to get the ball down the field, whether it was Drew Pine or Brady Cook. I mean, there weren't really any major deep or shots down the field, and it's not like they even had the ability to. So to a point, you have to credit the Alabama defense and their secondary, but the parallels are there. Eli Drinkwitz didn't want to admit to it, but I mean they are there. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard not to see those. And just the fashion. Those are two great opportunities, and this might be. I don't know how opinionated this is, but that wasn't Alabama's best game of the season. I mean, they showed they had some flaws. I mean, Missouri was able to stop them most of the first half, right? I mean, they only scored 6 points or 13, I guess, but not any major scoring chances until Drew Pine's interception. So it's not like Alabama was flawless. I think the Missouri defense ran out of gas in the second half, and that's what inflated the score. The final score could have been 21-0, and it would have been the same feeling, similar feeling, maybe not as much of a blowout. But yeah, offensively, I mean, it almost leaves me puzzled with the direction they go with Drew, whether it's Drew Pine at quarterback or Brady Cook, because Brady, honestly, Brady Cook's going to be limited when he gets back, and he might be less limited if he plays against Oklahoma than what he limited time he played against Alabama, but he's still not going to be 100%. And then Drew Pine's your other option, and respectfully, he's shown that he's not, there yet as far as decision making and stuff like that. That's the other thing. I mean, you cannot turn the ball over 3 times. That's just asking to lose that football game. It doesn't matter if it's Brady Cook or Drew Pine. You cannot turn the ball over. And some of those throws a few of those were he had the guy open, he missed him. A couple where the guy was never open, and he just shouldn't have thrown the ball. And I think Drew Pine knows that. I think Eli Drinkwitz knows that. That they can't turn the ball over. So parallels are there between this one and A&M, and if they didn't think they had something to learn from then, I think they most certainly do now.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned about Pine, it's just Eli Drinkwitz assessed it as he goes out there and is trying to win the game for them. And I think if you've ever played Madden, you completely understand this feeling, or NCAA now that that's the thing again, where you go down a touchdown. I used to be I used to think I was going to be a professional Madden Ultimate Team player, but my frustrations usually got the best of me because I'd go down a touchdown or two, and then all of a sudden you're trying to chuck an 80-yard touchdown every single play, and then it's third down, I believe, when Drew Pine throws that first interception. And it's his first passing attempt of the game. And for all the talk Eli Drinkwitz had made in the week leading up to it of staying one play at a time, staying on schedule, not trying to do exactly what Drew Pine ended up doing of making trying to be a hero, he apparently did not coach up Drew Pine on that very same mentality. So, look, as far as Drew Pine, I mean, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about this in December and January once portal opens up and we get a little bit of an idea of what Mizzou is going to do for the roster in next year. But it just, the quarterback situation next year was already interesting. And now with the play of Drew Pine, I mean, I don't think Drew Pine was ever really going to be ahead of Sam Horn in that competition starting off, but he certainly has not proven to be a reliable option for them either. Um, so we'll see what the developments are with that. And like many people are kind of turning this week of they're probably going to have to look in the transfer portal to create some competition with Sam Horn, and we'll see what type of marquee names they're going to get. It's going to be interesting to watch because that's was kind of my thought process too leading into this year of, if they contend very closely or make a playoff spot, man, they should be first in line for whatever transfer portal quarterback ends up being available. Not going to have the same credibility, or it just not going to have the same resume, not going to have the same pitch maybe to those transfer portal quarterbacks. But I think even then, your SEC team that just went 10-2, you might be losing Luther Burden, but you're bringing in some strong wide receiver recruits. You already have a strong wide receiver room, even when losing Theo and Luther, and proven that you can develop a good offense, at least in 2023. So I think they still have a good pitch to those quarterbacks, but we'll see what ends up happening there. Now, looking ahead to the rest of the season, because this was what the team was focused on after this game, and I can understand why it'd be very difficult for fans, and for as good as a 12-team playoff is, as given more fans, more teams reasons to watch the last few weeks, giving them more hope. If you have more hope, you're allowing yourself even more opportunities for letdown, and that seems exactly what has happened here. But a 10-win season for the 12-team playoff, I mean, last year, was obviously transcending for this football program, and obviously it's not going to be the same, because even if this team finishes with 10 wins, it's hard for me to see them being better than last year's team. Just when you look past the back score, there are 2 losses, 75-10 point differential compared to last year. They lose to LSU and Georgia, 2 very tough teams, especially Georgia. They lose to Georgia by 10, and I think both by 10. I could be wrong on that, but either way, very close games that they only lose in the last few seconds, compared to these 2 where they look completely unprepared against their only 2 ranked opponents, or their only 2 opponents that are going to finish the year ranked, presumably. So either way, though, as far as before we get to what a 10-win season would mean for this program, because I think it's more than probably people want to realize, just with their emotions and sadness and disappointment from not being able to compete with a playoff spot. But just what do they need to do to win out? I mean, we kind of hit on it a little bit last week, Michael, of, these last 4 games of the season. It's hard to see them being able to get, a really proud win. However, like you mentioned last week too, it wasn't on this show, it was on the Paul Feinbaum show, of, Arkansas, Oklahoma, specifically Arkansas, maybe not the easy out a lot of people expected them to. South Carolina right in that category too, much more so than Oklahoma. But I mean, Michael, just assessing the performance of these teams the last few weeks, what do they need to improve on to be able to win this year out?
Well, it's kind of interesting how Arkansas and Oklahoma did a little bit of a flip-flop, right? I mean, I think you go into this year thinking Arkansas, like you said, that's a very winnable game. It still is winnable, but a little less winnable than some thought. And Oklahoma hasn't, really shown much recently that would make I think anybody believe that they're going to be a team that's capable of, winning down their schedule. So I think as a team, they have to stop turning the ball over. I mean, it doesn't matter who you play. Even if Drew Pine steps in a quarterback against Mississippi State and throws 3 interceptions, Mississippi State's going to have as good a chance as anybody to win that football game. It doesn't matter who's in that quarterback. Can't turn the ball over. That's just, and you have to find some rhythm on offense and be able to move the ball down the field. I don't exactly know what that looks like yet, because, I mean, Missouri hasn't really been able to do it quite yet. But, they have to be able to move the ball down the field. Oklahoma plays Maine, Missouri, Alabama, and LSU on the rest of their schedule. So that doesn't look the most winnable in the world. So they might suffer a couple extra losses. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think offensively, not much has been proved yet in a positive light. I mean, Nate Noel's out, the running game gets shaky, and Brady Cook's out, the passing game gets shaky. So I guess get healthy. If they're not healthy, these games are going to be scary ones. I mean, Auburn on paper is a team Missouri should probably be able to beat somewhat comfortably, right? A score or two scores. I mean, obviously that doesn't happen, and there's injuries. Vanderbilt, I don't know if there are injuries there either, but still a close game. But you got to get healthy. Obviously they did not play well against Alabama by any means, but you can't deny the fact that there were crucial players on both sides of the ball out. And throughout the game, there were guys who went down too. I think Carntalson went down a little bit. Marvin Burks went down a little bit. I think Drayden Norwood went down a little bit. Those are guys you really can't afford to lose for long stretches of the game, especially a guy like Norwood. So you got to get healthy too. And we said after Vanderbilt earlier in the season that it was a perfect time for a bye week. I would argue that this is also a pretty darn good time for a bye week. So that'll be beneficial. But yeah, keep the ball safe. Doesn't matter if it's on the ground fumbling or interceptions. You cannot turn the ball over. Doesn't matter who's at quarterback. I don't want to throw all that blame on Drew Pine. Obviously, he's been the main catalyst of it so far, but Brady Cook could step in and start making decisions he's never really made before, errant ones. So you can't turn the ball over. And as long as the defense is consistent and maybe the offense can find a little flow and rhythm, it doesn't have to be 70-yard touchdowns, right? Just those chunk plays. I can't remember what stat broadcast calls an explosive play. It might be a 20-yard reception and a 10-yard run. That sort of thing where you can pick up chunk yardage. You're not working out a third and long or second and long every single trip down the field. So I guess just a little bit of rhythm on offense probably wouldn't hurt at all. But I mean, these games aren't necessarily. Every game's losable, but they're ones that they should be able to take care of. It's just a matter of if, I guess.
Yeah, all of what you mentioned on there, getting healthy is going to be the most important thing, even for Brady and Nate Noel, the two biggest names on that list. You have guys, Mookie Cooper also injured, Drayden Norwood leaving the game against Alabama 2 times with an injury, and a whole host, 4 safeties that were on the injury report, even if they played in that game against Alabama. I'm not sure how limited they are, how much pain they are in. So getting healthy is going to be a big part of it. What you mentioned too about getting in rhythm offensively, pretty much what we've been talking about all of the past few weeks for this Mizzou team. And moving on to what a 10-win season would really mean for them, it's hard to place them in the context of all of history, but this would only be Mizzou football has less than 10 win seasons or 10 double-digit win seasons in their program history. Now, of course, some of that is they didn't expand the schedule until late 90s, early 2000s, but still, considering the results of this team from 2015 to 2022, a 10-win season is still something you can hang your hat on. Sure, the wins might not be as big statement wins as they got last year. There's not going to be a blowout on a team like Tennessee. There's not going to be a really true gritty win like they had over Florida last year either. And a few others in that season, not going to be, a turnaround game like they had against Kansas State last year. People compared Auburn to that, but not a 4-quarter game like Kansas State really was. So they might not have that to hang their head on. But at the end of the day, when they look back at the records books on this, they're going to have a 10-2 season. And, as far as what it means for the future of this program, I think a playoff berth would have obviously given them, again, a much stronger resume, but I think you can still continue to build a lot of that recruiting momentum with a 10-win season. I think the other thing you would maybe like is just a phenomenal season for Luther Burden, where you can say to these 5-star playmakers, look at what Luther Burden was able to do here. Not only he comes in as such a talented guy and has success here, but look at his story, he came in as a freshman. We limited his opportunities when we really spent that year to develop him. His sophomore season, he really takes a massive jump, and then he continues that in his junior year. But he still probably is going to be a top 15 NFL draft pick, so that they got that to hang their hat on, got that to put on their resume. And again, for these recruiting momentum, I think no matter what, double-digit win season in the SEC is what it is. Michael, any thoughts on that and kind of what they can build off of 10-win season again?
I agree with almost everything you said. This is just hypothetically. I mean, they still have to win 4 more games, so let's get that clear, right? Obviously, they still have to win 4 more games, and I think we touched on this earlier. That's by no means is that solidified that's going to happen. But in the perfect world, that they do go out and win 10 more, and then win in play in whatever bowl game. Probably, I mean, maybe the college football playoff, but that's up for interpretation. But maybe it's a bowl game, and they finished with 11 wins. It's just not going to feel the same. I mean, there's not going to be a signature win. But Missouri fans and the media can go back on last year and say this Missouri team had a chance to beat LSU, right? They were in that game. This team had a chance to beat Georgia. They were in that game until late. And you could tell that, that Missouri team was capable of beating those high quality Georgia and LSU teams, right? I mean, not everything went their way, and maybe you can argue that their lack of experience in those situations, playing at such a high level, maybe hurt them. They haven't shown anything that could prove to anybody that they were capable of beating a team as good as Alabama or A&M. I mean, maybe on the defensive side of the ball, but as a team, they didn't show much that proved that they could go off and win those games. So I think that's going to be the frustrating part. And it's not like, they left games on the table. They left 2 games on the table last year. You can make that argument, but again, they just didn't do anything that was really heartening at all that would make anybody think that they were going to win those 2 games. So I think that's the difference. There's going to be just more general disappointment, and maybe not more disappointment, but a different type of disappointment. I'm sure people are going to look back on last season too and say, man, we were this close. Like they were this close to walking away with those 2 wins. And if they win both of those games, goodness gracious, who knows what what ends up happening. That's a insane hypothetical world. But, the disappointment's different this year because they're not as good as they were supposed to be. And that's kind of a cold, hard truth, a hard reality that I don't know if people have fully embraced yet. So I think it's just different levels of disappointment. 10 wins is 10 wins, and Drinkwitz is, recruiting at a different level for Missouri that I don't want to say it's historic, but I'd imagine it's some of the best it's ever been. And you have guys coming in. You have a Lamont Rogers. You have a Matt Zollers who is, maybe trying to flip a coin, but you have a Matt Zollers, Lamont Rogers. You have Alec Bodie. You have these, Jack Lang, Dayton Hopkins, some of the best guys in the state. Nationally touted players coming in and that are trying to, continue that kind of brotherhood idea that guys like Winery and Luther Burden and so forth are doing. So you're starting to kind of establish yourselves as a national recruiting, I don't want to say powerhouse, but, someone who's going to be there around. And I think 10 wins is 10 wins, and that's always going to help. But, we can always say what if and say, well, what if they win both of those games and go undefeated and make the college football playoff? Well, then they're going to get all the money in the world and maybe any recruit they want in the whole planet Earth. And it's a completely different story, but that's just not going to be the truth. So I don't think it's going to hurt recruiting. I don't know if it's going to give them necessarily a boost or not. But it's just going to be it's going to be a completely different type of disappointment knowing that they left those games on the table in the fashion that they did compared to last year when they were closer.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at, obviously, Mizzou is obviously going to have a little bit of a boost in recruiting for as long as the NCAA struggles to get their stuff together with NIL without the uniformity.
Absolutely.
Across all states. I mean, the legislation they have in Missouri is going to give them a boost, and it'll be interesting to see looking into this. I guess you could call it somewhat of a new era for Mizzou football. Obviously, this 2023 or 2024 season was kind of the start of it, turning the page with 2023 and being able to start to recruit a lot more. But now, after this year, there's hardly going to be any of those guys still kind of hanging around from that first seed that Drink was planted within this program of, there's Johnny Walker's not going to be around anymore. Brady Cook's not going to be around anymore. Luther Burden's not going to be around anymore. It's going to be a completely different looking team. Obviously, there's going to be some guys that return, but now the test is going to be to see, okay, Eli, you've recruited all these guys. You've got these high classes coming in. You carry some weight in the transfer portal as well. Now, can you, one, utilize the transfer portal to not only pick and choose the best players, because that's easy of a job enough, but then also developing that and building the right team. And then the same thing with the freshmen. You've been able to recruit the top recruit in the state of Missouri for 3 out of the past 4 years. Can you turn them into meeting that potential? So that's going to be the challenge for Mizzou football heading into the future. And it's the same challenge that Mizzou men's basketball is facing this year. Obviously, Dennis Gates has had some really strong recruiting classes, even after this past year, not quite meeting the results for Missouri, I guess is one way to put it, after 0-18 SEC season. And now the challenge becomes, sticking around at Mizzou, and a big part of that is going to be able to show that he can not only recruit, but also that his coaching staff can develop. And to help us out with this conversation on Mizzou basketball is our basketball reporter, Chase James. Chase, how are you doing, and how are you looking ahead to this Mizzou season coming up here?
It's good to finally join y'all. Y'all been doing this all season, doing a good job. Dude, this season, this is after last season, 0-18, like you just mentioned. I mean, it was pretty demoralizing for the program. This is kind of the next chapter for Mizzou basketball, to kind of get the ball rolling again and start going back on upward trajectory like they did the first year that Gates was here.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back on last year's team, it's an interesting case study because there was a lot of games. They shouldn't have been 0-18 in SEC play.
I agree.
And just a lot of games, it became boring to cover them because it was the same exact fashion. It was the same exact story with every single game, where they start out and strong, and then second, third quarter kind of peter a little bit, and then by the fourth quarter they just cannot keep up at all. A lot of defensive issues, not a lot of offensive scoring depth. It was really either Tamar Bates or Sean East a lot, and then the transfers disappointed quite a bit. Caleb Grill gets hurt, not his fault obviously, but Connor Vanover, not the big guy down in the paint that they were hoping him to be. A few other guys like that. And Michael, you were on the beat last year too. Just what do you think went wrong for this team last year?
It's really hard to pinpoint, isn't it? Because you look at it again on paper, and there's a talented roster of players, and maybe it's just a chemistry thing, right? I mean, a lot of guys who could do their own thing, but I think defensively there were some flaws, and I think Dennis Gates probably said it every single post-game press conference, talking in some way, shape, or form about rebounding the basketball. When you have that many big guys and you can't out-rebound teams, and just in general out-hustle teams, and energy, steals, forced turnovers, deflections, things like that, you're not gonna win a lot of games. I think I look at that rebounding category and just the hustle and effort in general as something that needs to get improved upon. And I mean, generally, it's a similar room of players. Obviously, you give or take a couple guys, but you're adding in a lot of freshmen again. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. It's an interesting thing to think about, right? He really has his first full group of players, his first full team with him now. I guess there wasn't any carryover last year from his first year to second year, but still, now this is the second year. His players, his program, and I'm not saying Dennis Gates is on the leash by any means. I mean, it's unfair to say that, and I obviously won't make that decision for anybody, but there's definitely some pressure, you'd have to imagine, right? And you can't get much worse than what happened last year. I'd like to think so. Anything in conference play would probably be a positive sign. And this is a talented team, and all three of us were at media days, and got a feeler for maybe some team chemistry and how things are going to work and things like that. And it seems like a group of guys who like each other. You have a group of 5 freshmen who I just touched on this afternoon who seem to have a cohesive, bond, and Chase this afternoon as well hit on the 5 returning guys who, again, now have played with each other for quite some time. When you bring in a guy like Mark Mitchell, who's obviously been close to Tamar Bates, and that's an interesting pair. They have chemistry there as well. So maybe this team gels better together. You have to cross your fingers though, because you can't replicate what happened last year. So I guess kind of a general vibe. It's only up from here type thing. I mean, you'd like to think that they can't get much worse.
Yeah, and like you just hit on, Michael, 5 returners that Chase wrote about today, and interesting group there of some sophomores who are being asked to take that next step. And then you have Tamar Bates, Caleb Brill, the 2 transfers that showed some promise last year, especially Tamar, who kind of just had to do it all, wear a lot of hats, quite a few games last year. But Chase, just what do you make of this returning group and what role they're going to play this year, not only on the court, but then also maybe to kind of ease along some of those younger guys?
Yeah, I think Tamar and Caleb are going to have really important seasons, just not even just on the court, but off the court. There's so many young guys coming in to this program that they can kind of take this season to kind of help Mizzou win now, but also kind of grow the program and grow these young guys into being the faces of the program in the future. I think Tamar, I think he's going to be probably the leading scorer again for the team, but I'm not sure how much more he's going to play. He played about, I think, 28 minutes per game last year. I think with so many transfers coming in that need minutes, plus the young guys, I don't know if he's really going to take much of a jump. But he still, he was, aside from Sean East, there was no other offense really besides Tamar last year. And then Caleb, he came in last year as one of the most important players on the team. He went down before conference play even began. I think he's going to be really important, especially with the 3-point shot. He didn't shoot it well last year when he did play, but at Iowa State he did. And then in the exhibition game, I'm pretty sure I heard he hit, I wasn't there, but I heard he hit like 5 threes. So if he can kind of keep that up, he's going to be really important. And then you look at like Anthony Robinson. I think he was probably the standout freshman last year. I expect him to be really important for this team this year too. He definitely needs to improve on offense. He's can't really shoot from anywhere outside of the paint, but defensively, he was so important for the team last year, and I think that's going to continue this year as well. And then Trent Pierce is a guy that I kind of disappointed me last year because he just never really found his way in the rotation. But I think if he starts to get minutes, like he's a combo wing, he's like 6'10". I think he has potential. He just kind of needs to put it all together.
And then, Michael, looking at this freshman class from Mizzou here, again, like we mentioned at the top 10 freshman class in the nation here, but how is Cincinnati going to develop them? And I think, honestly, what we learned last year even is they're not – Mizzou isn't going to play freshmen out there unless they're truly deserving of it. If they're better than other guys they have on the team, and they're not going to throw them out there just for the sake of getting them reps. But looking at this freshman class, is there anybody that stands out to you who might be seeing more playing time this season immediately?
The obvious one is Anor Boateng. He's the highest ranked of all of them, and he seems like physically he might be, physically, athletically, maybe the most, play ready guy. Super powerful. I think he's around 6'6", 215 off the top of my head, somewhere around there. But 6'6", 6'6", 220 guard forward who is still finding his feet a little bit offensively, but he's not inconsistent to the point where it's going to hurt the team to an extent. Obviously, high school to college adjustment doesn't always go the most smooth, so there's going to be bumps in the road for any freshman, especially when you're not the lead. You're not the lead guy. Now, when you're not the lead guy, you can make the argument that there's more or less of a leash because if they're only playing you 10 minutes a game, you have to make the most of those 10 minutes. But most of what Anor Boateng is going to impact is on the defensive side of the ball, and that physicality and that wingspan is exactly kind of what plays into that. He can shuffle his feet and guard multiple positions, which is important for any player at any position. But I would imagine that's going to be one of the main reasons he sees the floor. Same thing with Marcus Allen. Excuse me. I just I saw a tweet from John Rothstein earlier today, and it made me think of this too. A nice defensive pair between the two. But he said that the two have been a defensive force early on. So I would expect those two to see the court the most. The center rotation is going to be interesting with Trent Burns and Peyton Marshall. You look at a guy like Trent Burns, and you can't help but flash back to having a guy like Connor Vanover on your team. Whether that's positive or negative, again, that might be up for interpretation. We don't know exactly what Burns brings to the table quite yet. But there are positives and negatives of those very tall, very thin forwards and centers. Obviously, you're going to get mobility. You're going to get maybe some court spacing, some shooting, obviously shot blocking, but they are not very strong. And you can tell when you see Trent Burns on the court. So that's something to think about. Peyton Marshall's the exact opposite. He's still 7 feet tall, but he's 300 pounds. He's a monster, and I think his physicality alone is going to get him on the court. So T.O. Barrett might be kind of an odd man out in the guard rotation. It's a pretty deep guard room. He's a fascinating combo guard, and he just never really found his game on the offensive side of the ball. Which it's kind of hard to put a freshman on the court if they're not going to be able to, hold their own offensively. So he might be kind of an odd man out, but I think we saw last year that Dennis Gates is not afraid to play 14 or 15 guys, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if we see every scholarship player see the court on any given night. But from the jump, Barrett might be kind of an odd man out. If we're looking for guys who are going to play right away and make a direct impact, I would say Boateng and Allen.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned there about Dennis kind of just going through the whole roster, there was quite a few games there last year, especially in that early conference play, late non-con, where it just felt like it was a lot of people were questioning the constant rotation of those players and be like, why, like, are they trying to find any rhythm here? And I can definitely appreciate the idea of depth, wanting to get as many different lineups out there as possible, but to a certain extent, like find your five and go with them. I can definitely see where people are coming from there too. Moving on to the transfer class, Mark Mitchell obviously leading the class from Duke as well. Chase, just your thoughts on this transfer class and who sticks out to you there?
Yeah, it's a really strong transfer class. I think, Mark Mitchell is the standout. I mean, coming from Duke, that already kind of brings in like expectations, but he never really found his way, I don't think, at Duke, but I think he can with Dennis Gates' system. He's not a great scorer, I would say, like outside of the paint, but maybe he can unlock that this season. I'm really excited about Tony Perkins. I think he's kind of the perfect fit for Dennis Gates' system as a point guard. You kind of saw last year with Nick Honor. I mean, he struggled at times with efficiency, but he was the floor general and shot the three a lot. I think Perkins is going to be like that, but maybe more efficient. And he's also a really good perimeter defender and playmaker. I think he's going to be really helpful. Like you said, Marquez Warwick, like those two guards alone, I think are going to be really important. I don't know, maybe both find their way in the starting rotation. But you also have like Caleb Grill. I'm curious to see how they kind of balance the amount of guards they have, because they got a lot of guys from the transfer portal that are guards. I haven't even mentioned Jacob Cruz, who he's 6'8" and he might play the forward, but he's still kind of a guard with how he plays. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they balance that. I like the point you made about non-conference play last year, about how they couldn't really figure out a rotation. I think that might be the biggest, like most important thing they can do this non-conference, aside from just proving that they can start winning games again. They need to figure out who's going to play where before conference play begins. So
yeah, by the time they take the court November 4th against Memphis, I mean, when would be their last win? I can't remember. Well, I know for sure they played somebody that was easy out for them on like January 1st of last year or December 31st, because the day after the Cotton Bowl, Mizzou basketball had a game and nobody cared about it and they won. But it's been a long time coming for them to get a win. And as far as looking ahead to this non-conference season, a big emphasis last year from Gates was wanting to have a strong slate to really be battle tested heading into conference play. And I mean, they had some tough wins in there. They get a comeback win over Minnesota, and the ACC or the ACC Challenge. I believe they beat Pittsburgh in similar fashion. And then against Illinois they get blown out, against Kansas they get blown out. But looking ahead to this non-conference schedule, again they have Memphis to start the year, and Memphis is not an easy out for them to start non-conference play. Should be a good test for them. But just looking at this non-conference play, Michael, just what do you want to see from Mizzou before they start off SEC play in early January?
I think, in my opinion, I think the rotation of players was kind of confusing last year. And I mentioned earlier that, Coach Gates was not afraid to play, 13, 14, 15 guys, however many he had healthy. And then obviously injuries through some screws in those things. I believe obviously Caleb Grill was out. I want to say Trent Pierce might have had an injury, and maybe someone else I'm forgetting. I think I am forgetting one, but there were still injuries that kind of threw a wrench in some of the rotations, and it seemed like it was something different every night, and a different player was sitting every night. You have 50. I don't know how many players are on the roster, but you have a very talented group of guys. Find some consistency. Find the same group over and over again that works, and it doesn't mean the first 5-6 games you can you can tweak it. Obviously, they don't really. Obviously, Memphis is a challenge, but then you have Howard, Eastern Washington, Mississippi Valley State, Pacific, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Lindenwood, all consecutively. So you have to hope you have wins across the board in those games. If not, then there might be some serious conversations to have. But I guess in non-conference it'd be important to win those easy games too. I think there were a couple that were scares last year. So make those comfortable wins. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect to start. And you are still ironing those things out going into conference play. But you should be able to win those games comfortably. But yeah, I think finding some consistency in the rotation and find the guys that work well in your system and play them as much as you can, write them out. This is a talented group. Mark Mitchell, Tamar Bates kind of present as two lead players for this team, and you have so many guys who can score, so many guys who can defend, and many guys who can make plays. Find some consistency in the rotations, see who works. I think when you switch it up that much, it just creates confusion in the team, confusion in the fan base. Why is this guy not playing? Why is this guy playing over this guy? Why did this guy start this game but not 3 games ago? It just gets confusing and frustrating. So I think just finding some consistency in that area would probably be nice to find in the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, I'm looking back at the schedule over those last few minutes. Last win from Mizzou basketball, December 30th, like I said, over Central Arkansas, day after the Cotton Bowl. Last conference win for them against Tennessee in the SEC tournament in the 2022-2023 season. Chase, I'll pose the same question to you before we wrap up here. What are you looking to see from this Mizzou team in non-conference play?
I want to find hope, to be honest. It was last season. I think Gates got the benefit of the doubt because it was tough to replace Kobe Brown, Demoy Hodge, and with the injuries that they sustained. As bad as it was, people kind of gave him a year and hoping that this year is kind of where he gets back to winning again. But I like you guys have said, I want a consistent rotation. Like I said earlier, with these guys, figuring out who's going to play, who's not going to play. It's not going to be perfect again. And you have to experiment with this many players too. And we have to kind of get used to that. But once conference play hits, you have to be ready to start winning games and compete. My thing is with Gates, if they're as bad as they were with conference play last year, I think he's definitely on a hot seat. If he can at least get this team to kind of be in the 500 range, I think that's a good season. That's a big improvement. This is year 1 and trying to get back to contention. It's not going to be amazing, and we can't have super high expectations, but we have to start seeing some hope out of this team that they can start getting back to where they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned about Gates, I mean, that's something I want to talk about too. And we were talking about a little bit at the top, and then Michael brought up as well of just what this year will mean to him. And like you said, last year, Chase, he got the benefit of the doubt last year, and he's always going to have a certain sense of security just because of how well he recruits, and it's always going to be able to clean on to that for a little bit. And there's so many politics of having a first year AD and all of that means for all the coaches within an athletics program. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly something he has to prove this year. It can't be, just another season where they cruise to another 0-18 season. And obviously there's some more pressure put on him. But this year, the results are going to be taken quite a bit more heavily to see if he can develop that young talent and again to actually develop that talent he's getting out of the transfer portal as well to assemble a team. So will be interesting to watch here. Like you said, Chase, just to prove that they're going to be better than last year. Even in non-conference play last year, they lose to Jackson State, and you have Kansas, Illinois in December, which are going to be two really tough tests. And I don't think they're going to be favorites in that favorites in either of those games by any stretch. But to even have closer games than those were last year, and I mean, I guess even in 2022, the Kansas game wasn't close, but they win the bragging rights game, much better than last year's game. So we'll have to see what this team shows. I think it's going to be a fun non-conference slate because of what we were just talking about. Of it, it's been so long since we've seen this team win. There's so many new pieces that it's going to be interesting to see exactly where each guy fits in. There's obviously a lot of them have their own individual talent, but how they actually build together as a team. So it'll be interesting to watch. We'll have coverage for all of it here on Missouri on SI. We appreciate you tuning into this episode, and make sure you tune into the rest of our football and basketball coverage. I'm Joey Van Zummeren, joined by Michael Stamps, Chase James.